morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Drew Pallas with the Security Title Guarantee Corporation of Baltimore, and I will be your moderator for the presentation. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items. Attendees are in listen-only mode, but feel free to ask any questions by typing them into the questions box on the dashboard. And likewise, with comments, you can type those into the chat box. We will take some time to address questions at the end. Today, we are excited to have April Gentry with us, and she is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Closinglock. She's going to offer analytics and actionable steps that you can start taking to combat real estate fraud. On behalf of everyone at Security Title, thank you so much for carving out some time for this important topic, and without further ado, I will hand the reins to April.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Drew. And thanks to everyone at Security Title for inviting me here today. As Drew said, I'm April. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships over here at Closinglock, and I'm excited to chat with you all about cybercrime and then solutions in real estate, of course, to protect you and your business, and then give you a little peek behind the curtain of some of our tools that we currently have. I definitely want this to feel engaging. So if any point, if you have a question as I'm going, feel free to pop it into the chat box and I'll be sure to answer those while they're top of mind. Otherwise, I'll save some time at the end as well. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so I can't tell you how many times I've heard my mom say, when I was growing up, we never had to lock our doors, right? That was the world at one point. Then these fellas here started scaring people, and we didn't have to be robbed. We didn't have to, we didn't have to have these incidences happen to us to know that we needed to take security cautions, right? We heard it on the news, we heard it from our neighbors, and as criminals became more sophisticated, so did our security, right? The home alarm system was invented and very widely used in the 1980s. And for the past several decades, because of the precautions that we have taken, the crime rates have pretty steadily decreased, as you can see in this chart here. At the beginning of the 90s, they were very high, and over time, they've just really plummeted, and that's really because of the precautions that we're taking. I know most of you probably have some sort of Ring doorbell at this point. I do as well. It's sort of the modus operandi. Unfortunately, wire fraud, on the other hand, is continuing to rise. Email was safe until it wasn't. Fax was safe until it wasn't. As humans, we have to evolve with the times to survive. So this is why it's imperative, it's very important that we take steps to prevent folks like this, the bad guys, from winning. All right. Let's take a look at some of the stats in real estate today. So the FBI reported that $2.7 billion were lost from business email compromise claims in 2022. That was actually up from 2.6 in 2021. That accounts for 21,000 business email compromise complaints with reported losses. So in case you don't know, business email compromise is when an attacker obtains access to a business email account, your work account, for instance, and imitates your identity, right? And from there, they can email the buyer, the seller, the realtor, etc. And their goal is to dupe people out of money. So the average business email compromise loss today is $150,000, which is a lot of money. You know, I think for some of our larger agents, it might not be a crippling number, but I'm guessing there's a lot of small business owners out here today who, you know, that would be a struggle coming back from $150,000 loss. So that's why it's definitely important to have the steps in place to protect yourself. All right, the next stat up there is $396 million. Those are the reported losses from consumers in real estate. As you can probably guess, that number is also up from the year prior. The terrifying fact or stat in this is that only accounts for about 15% of estimated losses. And that's just what the FBI assumes, right? So if you take, 6 times the $396 million, that really is more accurately defines like what the actual losses were. I did the math before, so I know what it is, but it's $2.37 billion in losses from real estate wire fraud every year. So it's certainly something we have to do better at. All right, so I have a few different aspects that we have here to wire fraud and just fraud in general. And I'm curious to hear from the audience, like which type of fraud up here is what keeps you up at night, right? We have number one, the fake sellers, the need for better identity verification. Two, unverified payoffs, so just the gateway to fraud. Three, the lack of awareness, right? The education gap between what we know and what our consumers often don't know. And then the insecure emails, right? The encryption paradox. So if you guys want, feel free to put into the chat which one of these items is really where your kind of focus is today. All right. Looks like we have definitely a variety of responses, which is not surprising. We're going to touch on all of these different aspects today, talk about how they originated, what are the steps that we can take to prevent ourselves from losing sleep over a loss from your business. All right. So I think one thing people are always curious about is like, why real estate, right? Unfortunately, it's really the perfect target for fraud. And these are three of the high level reasons. There's a lot more reasons besides this, but one is just that high value of transactions, right? This is probably the most expensive purchase the average person is going to make in their life. And so for the fraudsters, if they're going to make more money per attack, they're going to take more time per attack. They're going to think about really sophisticated ways to intercept that transaction. Two is a carousel of people, right? As we all know, there are so many people involved in a transaction, from the buyer, the seller, the realtor, the lender, an attorney, you, the title agent, sometimes the underwriter. And this unfortunately gives fraudsters a lot of access points, right? All they need is one email, one phone number, and they're able to intercept that transaction that way. Lastly is the unsuspecting consumer, right? So again, as I mentioned before, we can train ourselves, we can train our staff, we know what to look out for because we do this all the time. But unfortunately, the buyer who maybe purchases one or two homes over the course of their life, they don't know what they need to look out for, right? They don't know oftentimes what encrypted email is. They don't know that they have a target on their back. So for the fraudsters, it's the perfect melting pot, right? The high value of transactions, all the different parties throughout, and then the uneducated consumer in there as well. There are a few different types of fraud. As we all know, there's incoming wire fraud, there's outgoing wire fraud, and then the newer one is identity fraud as well. So we're going to chat through a few of these, but this first one here is inbound wire fraud. So what is the risk to the home buyer? There are approximately 6.9 properties purchased every year. I think this year we were a little bit closer to 5, and I know we all know it's kind of a slow year. And of those, 35% of those are first-time home buyers, which it's exciting, it's new, it's totally chaotic. You're having conversations with your realtor, your lender, some folks from the title agency. You don't know what to do. I bought my first home 2 years ago, and it definitely I felt it for the first time. And of all those purchases, 75% of buyers, whether or not it's their first time purchasing a home or not, they all believe that the title agent would be able to recover or retrieve their funds if they were wired out to the wrong place. So that is a representation of how much trust and miseducation really they have in the agent and the process overall. So because of that, we really do have a fiduciary responsibility to protect our customers, right? And protect their money. And how do you prevent incoming wire fraud, right? I think there's a couple ways, but the absolute best way to protect your business and your customers is through a secure portal. Because so much fraud happens inside email, the goal really is to move away from email altogether, right? With Closinglock's secure portal, you're able to include any party in the transaction who needs access to that sensitive information. So for instance, the buyers, the sellers, the realtors, the lenders, attorneys, that whole carousel of people that we talked about, right? Generally, the fraudsters have so many access points. So if we're able to send sensitive information to all of those folks in a secure place, we're absolutely going to eradicate wire fraud from happening from this angle. So in our secure portal, as you can see here, buyers can receive documents, any documents that you'd like to send. So welcome packages, commitments, buyer information sheets, etc. It's all unlimited. They can download wire instructions as well, or they can make good fund compliant earnest money deposits or cash to close payments. You know, we recognize that not all technology users are the same, so we want to give buyers options, right? So they can do what they feel most comfortable with. So they can either download those wire instructions and do it kind of the old-fashioned way, or they can make that digital payment online. You know, to fully eradicate the risk of incoming wire fraud, buyers do need that option. So fraudsters can't intercept their email and they can't intercept those funds. For the title agent, they'll actually receive a receipt with the file number, the property address, the closing date, and the total amount, eliminating the headache of escrow officers matching various deposits with individual files. So from that escrow perspective, it's going to be a huge value gain as well. Additionally, buyers can e-sign any documents that don't require a wet signature prior to the closing. So it's really an easy one-stop shop for buyers to gather all the important information on the real estate closing and complete all those tasks. It's also a centralized location for the title agent to communicate with the buyer or the seller. And with that, I do have to say, like, our product, our software is agnostic, right? So you can use it with any title production software that you're currently using via our web-facing portal.
And April, do you mind if I ask a quick question for my own
Yeah,
self real
sure.
quick? Does the tool work with real-time payments too? And could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, it does. So we have our real-time payment rail built currently. So if your bank uses real-time payments, you can elect to receive all of those funds as real-time payments. We recognize that good fund legislation is kind of changing across the country, and so it might not be written yet as an acceptable form of payment. So we give title agents the option of whether or not they want to receive all of those funds as wires, or if they want to receive them as real-time payments. So good call out, Drew.
Cool, thanks.
All right. All right, so payoff fraud is unfortunately one area of fraud that just continues to haunt the industry all the time. We actually had an agent who signed up last December because they experienced a loss. You know, like a lot of other title agents, a lot of folks that we talk to, you know, they really thought they had their processes in place, and they did to some extent. But 98% of fraud happens because of human error. That's the I don't know, the hard truth. It's inevitable regardless of how many processes you have in place. So if you're solely relying on your team to keep you safe from fraud, you run a higher risk of being a target, unfortunately. But after this agent actually purchased our software, they ran the last 200 payoffs they had received and found 2 more that were fraudulent, which is crazy. That's really the scary part, because you might not know for a month that you wired off funds to a fraudster. So that's one reason that payoff fraud itself keeps people up at night. And really, how does this happen, right? A lot of agents think that if they get a e-fax from the bank, that is a legitimate payoff. But unfortunately, once the fraudster has inserted himself into the transaction, whether that's from the title agent's email or the buyers or the realtors, they can create a fake payoff statement that looks alarmingly like a real one. They simply input their own account number into the payoff, the eFax, they email it to the title agent, and then they collect the monies. I've seen a couple of them side by side, and they were both eFaxed, and it's a little wild. I'll say that. Here are the red flags, definitely to be on the lookout for. Did the payoff instructions change? Did the bank name change? Did the contact information change? So these are just a few things that would indicate there's probably a fraudulent payoff statement. If any of these situations arise, I hope your spidey senses definitely go off. But there are solutions out there to make this a little easier. You know, one thing you can do, which I think a lot of people have really gotten into the habit of doing, is calling the bank every time, but from a verified number, not the number on the payoff statement. You know, you sometimes have luck with that, you sometimes don't. There are some institutions that unfortunately won't verify that payoff. But you can also maintain an internal list of known payoff accounts. You'd have to absolutely keep it locked down so no one internally can manipulate that at all. You can also use a payoff verification service. And of course, Closinglock has a great one that I can't wait to show you. It's actually very simple. You add the account number, routing number, and we tell you in real time if it's a valid payoff account or not. So I think, you know, typically agents are spending roughly 53 minutes per file to verify accounts, whether or not it's a payoff account or a seller's account from proceeds. I'm sure a lot of you have felt this pain quite often. If you're doing, you know, around 100 files a month, for instance, that's almost 90 hours that you are paying someone to manually verify banking information, which is crazy because people can do so many more amazing things than sit on the phone. With our tool, again, you just add the account number and routing number. We tell you in real time if it's a valid payoff account or not. We have had our database since 2018, and we have a roughly 92% coverage on all payoff accounts. So some agents do maintain an internal safe list of known payoff accounts, but using something like Closinglock gives you really a much wider berth of coverage, right? And it's not only a lot more secure, but as you can see here, it's going to save you and your team so much hours each month, which means that you can focus on growing the business or providing better customer service as well. A cool fact I recently just learned, to date, we have received 9,575 fraudulent payoff statements that have been run through our system. So if you imagine the average home costs around $400,000, that means we've prevented almost $4 billion in being fraudulently wired out. All right. So the next identity fraud, I kind of like to call the fraud du jour. It's something that has certainly been growing over the course of the last year and a half. Here's how this scam works. So while most fraud involves pretending to be the realtor or the real estate agent or the title agent, tricking the buyer to wire out money, seller impersonation is just a little bit different. In this situation, the fraudster actually pretends to be the owner of a piece of property to steal the money from the sale. Right, so it's not that difficult to do. You look at public records to find properties without a mortgage, often focusing on empty lots or rental properties. They gather information about the property owner from these records and then create a fake ID. Oftentimes they contact the real estate agent through email or other electronic means. They always avoid meeting in person. So these are some of the things that really you should look out for. So if the scammer sets a really low price for the property, they do this to get people involved or interested really quickly. When they receive an offer, they accept it fast, especially if it's a cash offer. The closing proceeds are then sent by the scammer to the title company or closing attorney, and the deception usually stays hidden until the documents are recorded with the county authorities, or they may stay hidden for years. I know a lot of us heard about that property up in Pennsylvania over the summer with the $1.5 million home. they built an entire house there before the real owner knew. So it can be a little scary there. While there are some solutions like integrating an identity workflow into your processes or requiring multiple forms of identification, most people will not be able to tell the difference between a fake ID or a real one. My nephew is actually in college. He's 20. He's had a fake ID for a couple years, and it looks like it just looks real. Like they look so much better than they did when I was in high school. So utilizing an actual technology is really going to be your safest bet for verifying that those verifications. So there are other tools out there that utilize KBA, which is knowledge-based authentication. I'm sure a lot of us have heard about KBA or experienced it in the past. The National Institute of Standards and Technology actually only rates KBA as fair strength because of web or social media scraping. That just means the answers to those questions are typically found online somewhere. KBA also has a very high drop-off rate. So in the few times I've had to use it in my experience, they'll ask me something like, what street did you live on in 2016? And so if you've lived at the same location for most of your life, you'll know the answer pretty easily, but so would the fraudster. If you're, I don't know, in your 20s living in New York, like myself, you probably might not remember where you lived then. But there are some great technologies out there, and I want to show you guys a little bit of what our tool does. All right, so this is going to be the seller's view for our identity tool. With this tool, you can actually verify any party's identity at any point throughout the transaction. So you don't have to just verify the seller's. You don't have to do it at the beginning. You can do it at any point, at any time if you feel like something might be amiss. So our tool covers 7 steps and it covers hundreds of data points. So first we do know your customer check and verify identity across various sources like credit bureaus or financial institutions. Then we run a check on the email, the phone, address, social security number, and date of birth, checking it against deceased records checks as well. So then we have the seller take a photo of their ID. They can choose an ID, a passport, or a driver's license, front and back in real time. And what we're doing is we're matching the information on the front with the information on the barcode. And the barcode is being verified by the Department of Motor Vehicles or the issuing government agency. This whole process for the seller takes maybe 2 minutes. We don't tell them the results. We just send those to the title agent immediately. We had a customer sign up very recently, like within the past month. And the day after they finished their implementation, we got this email from him. He said, coincidentally, Closinglock busted our first seller impersonator this afternoon after our call. We sent the seller ID verification on a vacant lot transaction and the seller failed in every way. I was able to use an online search tool to locate the real seller and get his phone number. We called him and sure enough, he verified he was the owner of the lot, said that it was listed, but that he was not under contract and that it was not him we were dealing with. We would have paid $190,000 on this one had we not used this tool. So matching the individual's identity against those hundreds of markers to assure validity really is a multilateral process designed to give you and your team peace of mind, right? Once we have those verification results that you will see, it'll give you a very clear idea of whether or not the agent passed, or I'm sorry, the seller passed or failed and why they failed, right? Was it a fake ID? We also do an IP address check, phone number check, social media accounts check. So just a ton of good insight to give you guys just our best recommendation for whether or not you should proceed with this seller. And so here's probably some information that nobody wants to hear, but I do feel like it's important to be said. The funds that are lost or wired into the BIS aren't going to buy some 16-year-old kid an Xbox. They aren't going to buy somebody else a Ferrari. They are going to fund weapons, drugs, or human trafficking or terrorism. And that's just the sad, unfortunate truth of where wire fraud, real estate wire fraud is going. And I feel very strongly, very passionately, like we have a responsibility to do everything we can to keep money out of the hands of these types of individuals. So Closinglock mission really is just to secure that transaction and make it an easier closing experience for all parties. We recently completed our SOC 2 Type 2 certification, which is very exciting, and it aligns directly with our goals of providing the highest protection for your agents. We also use multi-factor authentication, so no downloading apps or passwords or creating usernames. We got rid of that pain point without sacrificing security. And it's tough to find a software that both makes your job easier and more secure, but Closinglock strives to do both. We want to save you time on every closing and make it incredibly secure. So to date, we have protected over 500,000 transactions, which amounts to over $220 billion saved, and that's over 1 million wires that we have protected. And last but not least, before we take some questions, everybody needs a wire fraud response plan. So Alta has some great ones online. They have an incredible worksheet you can download and actually assign separate tasks to. So you need to know when wire fraud happens. You can always contact the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, that's IC3. What is the first step you're going to do? Who is going to be responsible for that? If fraud happens from a payoff, the steps might be a little bit different than if fraud happens if your buyer, for instance, wires out money. So have that response plan in place, have it tacked up at every single desk. Keep it secure. These are just good policies to prevent fraud from happening to you and your business. So if anyone has any questions, happy to answer them for you. I know we ran through a ton of information here up top, but happy to help any way I can.
Great, thanks, April. We have a couple questions here. Number one is, I guess, piggybacking off of the real-time payments question that I asked. Does your payment tool work on ACH?
So when the buyer makes his earnest money deposit or cash to close, he is making that as an ACH. When we receive the funds, and then we wire all of those funds out to the title agent, and that is how they are good fund compliant in all 50 states. It's a good question.
Great. Next question. Why is it important to use a secure portal rather than just an email?
Yeah, that's good. So just because of the amount of encrypted email, first off, is difficult. Like, we all get encrypted email because we work in an industry that utilizes encrypted email a lot. But for a buyer who probably has never seen an encrypted email before, they're not going to know if encrypted email does the job that it's supposed to do. It gets to the intended recipient. Once the buyer gets it, they could get another email that looks very similar to it and not know the difference, right? So there are definitely some good uses for encrypted email, but getting outside of email, because that's where so much fraud happens, is really the move that we all need to make. I can't tell you how many times my mom has received an email and called me and been like, hey, I don't know, I got this email and it looks like it's from my bank, or should I click on this link? And those are all phishing emails, right? And what it does is it tricks you into clicking on a link and then putting in your username or an account name or something like that. So that's why it's just so important to get out of email altogether, especially on a transaction like this.
Makes sense. And a quick, with October being Cyber Fraud Prevention Month, our IT director, our CTO said the best way to share a fraudulent link is to use the print screen or take a screenshot of what you see. Don't ever forward the email or forward the link in itself.
Yeah, that's a good note for
Good
sure.
tidbit for everybody. So
Awesome.
next question coming through. What is the average cost for this software?
Yeah, so it varies based off volume. Our tool is typically so it's unlimited use of all of our tools for a flat fee, and that would be based off volume. So it's based off volume, usage, or commitment as well. And then you pay a one-time implementation fee to get set up. That is one time. It just goes through the training and getting your wires set up, any of your integrations potentially. And then after that, it's just a pay as you go, right? So you just pay per file as you go. This gives agents tons of flexibility, right? If you have a very busy month, you pay for a lot of files. If you don't have a busy month, you don't. You just pay for what you're using.
Great. Next question is, what is the best way to introduce title agents to Closinglock? How do you start that conversation?
Yeah, so here's my contact information. Oops, yeah. You guys are always welcome to email me. Definitely want to make sure they're well taken care of. We'll walk through their kind of processes. It's important to understand, what they're looking for, what their pain points are, how they would utilize our tools. Because our tools are able to consolidate a few other tools, oftentimes it winds up being cost savings for people, right? If you can eliminate DocuSign, if you can eliminate certified or payments, or just consolidate all of the tools that you're currently using. And so talking through that allows everybody, to get a good sense of what your overall spend is going to be and how you're going to use the product to be more efficient as well. So feel free to introduce me. It's my email, my phone number. You're welcome to pass my information along. There's also a form on our website too. So if they just want to take a peek around, look at our tools, they can fill out a demo request form when they're ready.
Cool. And this next question, I think you use the term software agnostic,
Yeah.
but the question says, does Closinglock integrate with any other softwares?
We do. So we do integrate with SoftPro, RamQuest, and Resware. So agents who are using those tools can complete a lot of tasks directly in their product. But about half of our customers actually use our web-facing portal. And the lift for title agents is very simple. You would just add in the individuals you want to include in the file, so buyer, seller, email, and phone, and then you would select the tasks that you want each of them to complete. And then really all the magic happens from the buyer and the seller side, right? Which is what I showed you guys in the secure portal, all the things the buyers can do. And then also with the seller side, how they can verify their identity through that as well. But to that, if there are any like agents on, like underwriter reps on here, the agency reps who ever want to see a full demo of their product, we're absolutely happy to show you guys as well. It's always good to get like the full view of the product and how it's useful as well.
Sure. Next question we have, what are the primary reasons why title companies and law firms sign up for Closinglock?
Yeah, so our most people do come to us because they're looking for security measures, right? And so our product can kind of be broken down into those two sections, like fraud prevention, which is wire fraud prevention, payoff fraud prevention, and identity fraud prevention. But when they see how our tools work alongside the documents, the secure portal, the e-signatures, they realize how much more secure and efficient they can run by kind of consolidating all of those tools into one platform to be able to communicate with their buyers and sellers.
Next question is, can I use this tool at the closing table?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, it depends too on where your buyers or sellers are. We have people do it. It's something they can send out as soon as the file is open. They could also do it at the closing table, have everyone verify their identity at that point. You could also wait and have the buyer submit their payment, their cash to close at the table as well. I know sometimes those fees might change from when from when the money is wired to when the home actually closes. when my husband and I closed on our house, we got a check like 6 weeks later for $245 because we paid too much, right? So being able to make those payments, at the actual closing table too, will prevent things like that from happening.
Awesome. Final question is, what is on the roadmap for Closinglock?
Oh, it's a secret. No, really, our goal is really to stay one step ahead of the fraudsters, right? As much as we can. So we really rely on feedback and information from title agents, from underwriters. What are you guys seeing in the industry? What are the tools that would make your lives easier and more efficient? So our tool is really built by feedback and information that we've learned from all of you guys. So there will always be things on the roadmap that it's like a nice to have and a must have, and security will always be our must have. So our tools will keep becoming more robust. Our security tools will continue getting more robust. But as far as like the efficiency side of it too, we want we want it to be a marriage of both. So if there's ever anything that you think would be really valuable, a valuable add to our tools, hit me up. Always open to feedback.
Aren't we all? Or we should be,
Yeah.
at least. Great. Well, so we're 6 minutes over, but hopefully you got 6 bonus minutes with our webinar today. But if we didn't get to your question, if you don't have any additional questions and you come up with any later, we're available. April's available.
Absolutely.
If you want to funnel anything through your state contact here at Security Title, any and all questions at any time, send them over. We'll get them answered. And this webinar, any of our webinars are going to be posted on our website, esecuritytitle.com. There's a videos link on the website. We post regularly on LinkedIn, Facebook. A follow there is appreciated. Closinglock has their channel, so please follow along. A lot of content. Closinglock posts more than us for sure. Great content there. There will be a short optional survey sent out at the completion of this webinar, and any feedback, as we mentioned, is much appreciated. Our final webinar of 2023 will feature the man himself, Ted Rogers, and Diane Tom from Alta. We're going to do a recap of 2023, forecast 2024. So thanks, everybody. Seriously, thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, Drew. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, April, especially. Bye-bye.
Bye.